It all started with a tablet left charging in the sunroom, screen glowing like a low-level threat, not unusual in a house where shared tech doubled as shared lives. I wasn't snooping. I was looking for the delivery notification on a set of walnut dowels I'd ordered from Vermont. That's how banal it was. I wanted to make drawer joints. And then, there it was, Lena's messages, her login still open, like a door she forgot to close behind her. I know what most men say at this point. I wasn't looking for anything. But no, I was. Not at first. But the moment I saw that name, Colby, I followed the scent like a bloodhound. Her most recent message, he's sweet, but he'll never get out of that dusty workshop. No real ambition. No instinct for opportunity. He thinks legacy means waiting 30 years to be remembered. I'm over it. Followed by a winking emoji and a reservation confirmation for a resort in Tulum. I read it twice, 3 times. It was grotesque, not just the betrayal, but the casual dismissal, like I was some musty antique she tried to refurbish and given up on. Colby, of course. The grinning, too pretty Instagram furniture maker I'd collaborated with last fall. I gave him his first boost, featured him on my page, even let him film at my shop. He called me old school cool. I thought he meant it. But now I saw it, the plan. Lena had never really liked how slow I moved, how careful I was with wood, with words, with money. I was building a life. She wanted a launch party. You have to understand. I put 15 years into this craft. Every table, every beveled edge, every uneven callus on my palm, earned. The idea that she was laughing about it over cocktails with a man who probably uses power sanders on reclaimed barn wood made my throat fill with sawdust. I put the tablet down gently, like it might bite me. I stood in the sunroom, frozen. My entire house, once our house, felt like a set for a film I didn't audition for. That's when it started to unravel. At first, I thought I could confront her, get an apology, maybe even some honesty. Instead, I got a monologue about how I'd stalled. That word. Stalled. Like a rusty truck on a rural road. She said she needed someone with vision, someone who could elevate her curations. I'm not a violent man. Never have been. But I swear to you, for a moment I wanted to take a hammer to the tablet, to her art books, to the smooth steel handle of the espresso machine she insisted we buy. But I didn't. I just nodded. I let her think I was absorbing it like a sponge. Let her believe she'd finally made her dramatic escape from the shackles of slow love. I slept in the workshop for the next 3 nights. Not because I had to, but because I needed to hear the wood crack and settle with the temperature shifts. It reminds me that some things fight back quietly. It was during that time, just me, the pine dust, the soft hum of the router, that I started going back through the designs I'd never released. Originals. One-offs. Pieces I'd sketched, shelved, shaped only in my mind. And something felt off. A friend messaged me. Hey, congrats on the new Ash Inheritance design. Didn't know you finally launched it? But I hadn't. That piece wasn't public. It was in my flat files. Only 2 people had seen it. One was me. The other was Lena. I checked Colby's new website. There it was. Rendered, tagged, branded with his stupid golden hour photography under his name. Slight variations, sure, but unmistakably mine. And that's when I knew. She'd not only laughed at me, she'd sold me. She took what I'd shown her in trust, what I'd left lying around like sacred instruments in the open, and handed them to a boy with a ring light. And as if fate were mocking me directly, a week later I got a glossy postcard in the mail, Emerging Visions, a curated furniture experience. Lena's next show. Headliner? Colby. And right there in the description, pieces crafted from the soul of forgotten wood, reimagined by youthful brilliance. That's when I stopped breathing for a full minute. She was going to display my unborn work like it was Colby's second coming. Take my hands and cut them out of the picture. The worst part wasn't that she cheated, or that she lied. The worst part was that she thought I wouldn't notice. That I'd go back to sanding dovetails and muttering into my tea while she converted my blood into boutique catalogs. But here's the thing about quiet men who work with their hands. We remember every detail, every joint, every splinter. We don't scream. We carve. And when we're done, the world doesn't even realize what we've taken back until the gap is too clean, too perfect, and too late to fill. It's strange how peace always looks like routine when you're living inside it. Our mornings were a ceremony. Lena made coffee exactly how I liked it. Oat milk steamed like silk, 1 dash of cinnamon, said it made the bitterness romantic. She always kissed me on the cheek before I walked to the shop out back, even if we'd argued the night before. Said she loved the smell of cedar on my shirts. We had Spotify playlists called Sunday Mornings, Shop Vibes, and Dinners That Deserve Wine. She organized my Instagram posts better than I ever could, helped me write captions when my words felt too plain. For a long time, I thought that meant she believed in me, believed in us. I'd catch her looking at me sometimes while I sanded down tabletops, that half smile she had, the one where I imagined she saw the man she always wanted to be with. I know now it wasn't love in her eyes. It was calculation, the kind a curator uses when deciding where to hang a piece, what angle catches the most light, what wall gives it status. Still, I can't say it was all performance. There were moments when I'd swear we were genuinely building something. We'd make dinner together, light candles for no reason, talk about adopting a dog, a rescue, obviously. But there were signs, quiet ones, like how she stopped asking to hear the stories behind each piece I worked on. Used to be, she'd sit cross-legged on the workbench and listen while I explained why I'd chosen ash over maple, why I left certain knots visible. Later, she'd just nod, scrolling on her phone, throwing out words like texture and rawness like seasoning. And when Colby showed up that first time, all charm and cameras, she laughed too hard at his jokes. Said he was the future of furniture, which I brushed off as her usual hyperbole. He was just a kid with filters and a budget. But now, thinking back, I remember how she lingered when he spoke, how she started calling him visionary. I didn't say anything because I didn't want to sound jealous, like some old dog barking at a drone. You tell yourself love means trust, even when the evidence starts whispering otherwise. She began suggesting I take more risks, partner with bolder designers. I told her I wasn't in it for attention. She said, that's why you'll always be respected, but never remembered. I laughed. She didn't. I chalked it up to stress. She was working on some new exhibit, fielding calls from people with expensive tastes and short attention spans. I thought maybe she was just tired of living modestly, tired of weekends filled with farmers' markets instead of penthouses. We talked about moving, not far, just into town. She wanted a place with clean lines and light. I wanted a bigger workshop. We compromised by doing nothing. Looking back, there was a creeping distance, not in our bodies but in our vocabulary. She started calling my shop your little cabin. My pieces became nice, instead of incredible. She stopped reposting my work, stopped tagging me in anything. When I asked why, she said, not everything has to be shared. Funny how that logic never applied when she was selling curated sets of pottery from Slovenia. But I let it go. I let so much go. I figured it was just a phase. Relationships, like wood, shift with the grain over time. But sometimes, they crack. And there were moments I caught her staring at her reflection longer than usual, adjusting her blouse like she was auditioning for something I didn't understand. Once, she came home from a so-called gallery dinner, wearing lipstick she didn't leave with. I noticed. Of course I did. But I said nothing. I told myself the stove smudged it, or the wine. The truth was, I didn't want to be the man who had to ask. Because if you have to ask, you already know. Still, the day-to-day trudged on. We hosted friends, took photos that looked like joy. She smiled in every one. I look back at those pictures now, and I can see it. Not on her face, on mine. I looked like a man halfway out of a frame he didn't know was being cropped. Because here's the cruel part. The lie wasn't just her affair or the theft of my work. It was the comfort, the curated illusion that we were a team, that I was building something solid while she was quietly chiseling the foundation away. But you don't see the rot until the structure groans under its own weight. And by the time you hear the creak, it's already too late. It was a Tuesday, not the kind where thunder announces itself or shadows feel heavier. Just a regular gray Tuesday, the kind betrayal loves best. I'd finished a custom headboard for a returning client, a piece I was proud of. Layered walnut and ash with a carved floral inlay Lena once said reminded her of an old chapel in Portugal. I took a few photos in the right light, then walked into the house to ask if she'd help write the post. She had a knack for it. Always knew which hashtags drew the interior's crowd. I found her in the kitchen, on a video call, earbuds in, laughing that high, airless laugh she reserved for people she wanted something from. I was about to announce myself when I heard it. He doesn't even realize I repurposed the chapel pattern. It was buried in his sketchbooks. You'd be amazed what you can find when someone leaves the keys in the drawer. I froze. That phrase. My sketchbooks. My drawer. My pattern. Her voice was syrupy with charm, but there was a sharpness under it, like she wanted whoever was on the other end to know she was clever, that she wasn't just pretty. She was strategic. I didn't breathe, just stood there behind the doorframe, watching her sway slightly as she spoke, stirring a mug of tea like nothing she said could ever be traced back to consequence. She didn't see me. Or maybe she did, and just didn't care. I backed out of the hallway like a thief in my own house. The air felt different now, static in the lungs, sour at the edges. I went back to the workshop, sat on the floor, and opened the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet she never used. Sketchbooks. Dozens. I pulled out the one with the Portugal design, ran my fingers over the pencil lines like they might confirm or deny what I'd heard. The pattern had been my response to grief. I'd drawn it 2 weeks after my father died, unable to sleep, needing to make something sacred out of pain. And now it was repurposed. Not stolen outright. No, not that obvious, but borrowed, renamed, and dressed up in someone else's brand language. I didn't know who she'd been talking to. Could have been Colby. Could have been a client. Maybe even one of her curator friends, the ones who wore round glasses and called craft folk elegance. But in that moment, the illusion cracked. Not shattered, not yet, but cracked like a piece of veneer under sudden heat. Just enough to warp the shape of everything I thought I knew. The days that followed were quieter. I didn't confront her. Not right away. I watched. Not like a spy, more like a man trying to replay a crime scene with better clarity. I listened for tone changes, for the way her smile would drop half a second too late when I walked into a room. I noticed how she started taking calls on the porch, speaking low, always with a slight delay when I asked who it was. Gallery stuff, she'd say, or just clients. But her eyes darted too much, like she'd forgotten how to look at me and lie at the same time. One night, she came to the shop with wine, and that playlist she said reminded her of our early days. She tried to dance with me, soft, warm, false, and when I didn't move, she laughed and said I'd gotten too serious lately. I told her I was tired. I was tired of pretending I didn't notice her turning our shared history into a highlight reel for someone else. The headboard post went up that week, but I wrote it alone. Her only comment, maybe at a close-up. People love texture. I stared at her across the kitchen counter, wondering if she even remembered what the piece meant, what it came from. I wanted to ask. I didn't, because part of me still wanted to be wrong. Part of me hoped the voice on that call wasn't who I feared it was. That repurposed meant something innocent. That she loved me, in some broken, misaligned way. But I couldn't unhear her. And I couldn't unsee the way she moved through our house like a guest slowly packing her bags with my best belongings. Something had shifted. She thought I was blind. She thought my silence was permission. But what she didn't realize, what she never understood, was that I don't speak when I'm angry. I build. I calculate. I wait. And now, finally, I had something to wait for. I stopped reacting and started listening, not just to her words, but to the silences between them. You learn a lot when you pretend you're still asleep at 6:40 a.m. as your partner tiptoes out the front door with a duffel bag and says she's heading to the studio for a morning shoot. Lena never cared for early mornings. The first clue. I waited 5 minutes, then got in my truck and followed from 2 blocks behind. No drama, no cloak and dagger. Just me, the slow crawl of suspicion, and the comforting weight of every unfinished carving tool I hadn't yet thrown. She didn't go to the studio. She didn't even head downtown. She drove to a gated warehouse loft I vaguely recognized from Colby's Instagram. That ridiculous industrial space he leased for concept shoots. I parked far back, behind an abandoned tire shop, watched from a cracked rearview mirror as she rang the buzzer and walked in without hesitation. That was confirmation, but I wanted more. That night, while she showered, I pulled her backup hard drive from her desk. She thought I didn't know the password. But people are predictable. She used the name of her first gallery exhibit and the year she launched it. Artists are sentimental that way. Once inside, I found folders labeled with project names. All benign at first glance, but one stood out. Echo Mockups. Echo. The same term Colby had once casually tossed around when talking about collaborative legacy pieces. I opened it. Inside were dozens of high-res images, my sketches photographed, cropped, filtered. Notes in Lena's voice. Increase curve here. Feels too rustic. Make this sexier. There were price tags. Licensing info. Attribution. Designed by C.R. Colby's initials. My stomach didn't turn. It didn't have to. I'd already processed the betrayal. Now I was just cataloging it. I exported everything to a USB and put everything back exactly as it was. Then I called someone I hadn't spoken to in nearly 2 years, Michelle, a former client who now managed digital brand compliance for a luxury furnishings group. She owed me a favor for that impossible curved credenza I delivered on Christmas Eve. I asked her to discreetly look into any recent IP filings involving Colby or Lena, especially anything suspiciously close to designs I'd shared exclusively with Lena. She didn't ask why, just said she'd get back to me. Over the next few days, I played the role. I complimented her new exhibit mock-ups. I asked about her deadlines. I even brought her lunch once, kale and quinoa, just how she liked it when she was pretending to be clean. She beamed. She thought I'd adjusted, softened. Meanwhile, I started keeping notes. Times, names, conversations. When she left a receipt on the counter for a catering deposit, for an upcoming show she hadn't mentioned to me, I photographed it. When a delivery guy brought in a sculpture piece for L. Hampton and Associates, I noted the return address. I checked Colby's social media too, but not for photos for metadata. Most people don't know Instagram stores location stamps, even when you turn tagging off. A few uploads cross-referenced perfectly with the time Lena told me she was at brunch with her sister. She never had a sister. She has a half-brother in Tucson and no contact with him. And then Michelle called back. She found 2 pending design registrations filed by a shell company, one of which matched my Ash Inheritance design. The kicker? The address used for the submission matched Lena's P.O. box. That was it. The moment it moved from betrayal to theft, from emotional wreckage to strategic incursion. But still, I said nothing. I smiled. I kissed her on the shoulder when I passed by. I let her hang the new abstract painting in the hallway and ask if the negative space made the house feel bigger. I said it did. All the while, I was building something behind her back, a story, a sequence, a map of her deception so detailed it could hang in a gallery. But I wasn't ready to burn it down yet. Not until I could take everything back, with interest. It came in the most unceremonious form possible. An auto-generated email confirming a press release scheduled to go live at midnight. Subject line: Echo Collection Launch Exclusive Preview. I hadn't touched the computer that morning, but the login was still cached from the last time I checked her drive. Just curiosity at first, I told myself, one more stone to turn over before everything shattered. But when I clicked the link and saw the page, sleek black and gold, minimalist fonts, the kind Lena always said made things feel bigger than they were, I understood the shape of the blade she'd planted. There it was, my chapel pattern, clean lines and burnished finish, front and center on the site. The title? Redemption, an original by CR, curated by Lena Hampton. My design. My name erased. My grief turned into marketing copy. A reinvention of traditional craft, told through the voice of a new generation. I read the description 3 times, the words blurring at the edges, not because I was overwhelmed, but because I was calculating the silence it would take to survive it. The press kit was already built. Photos, bios, mock interviews. A whole mythology around Colby as this fresh-faced savant rediscovering analog design through modern mentorship. She was spinning him as the prodigy, and me as the ghost he surpassed. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the wood grain on the ceiling, wondering how many times I'd told her about that pattern, about where it came from the night I stayed up until dawn after my father's funeral. The way I carved the curves to mimic the arches of the old mission where we held the service. I had told her everything, and she had turned it into a bullet point in a branding deck. I should have felt rage. I should have punched a wall or screamed or smashed the keyboard. But instead, I felt distance, the kind that hardens everything it touches. That's when I heard her coming in. Door creak. Keys on the counter. That bright, performative "Hey babe" she used when she felt untouchable. I turned off the monitor and stood up slowly, like I was just finishing an email, like nothing was different. I looked her in the eye and said nothing. That silence? It scared her. I saw it. A flicker. Just a half-second of instinct in her pupils, like a predator realizing it had been seen. Everything okay? She asked, setting her bag down too gently. I nodded. One slow, precise nod. She smiled, relieved, but confused. And I realized she had no idea I'd seen it. No idea I'd already planned the slow dismantling of every brick she'd stacked on top of my work. That night, we ate together. Pasta. She talked about the lighting for the upcoming gallery opening, thinking of something immersive, maybe projections of tree rings, that earthy vibe people are into right now. I asked her questions. I watched her lie, effortlessly, gracefully. Every word she said felt like a bead sliding on a string I was about to pull taut. When she reached across the table to brush a crumb from my beard, that familiar, intimate gesture, I let her. I even smiled. But inside, something had snapped. Not like a dry twig, not brittle. more like a thick beam under silent pressure, cracking slowly, invisibly, until the whole structure shifts just enough to never be safe again. After dinner, she showed me a video draft for the promo campaign. I pretended to watch it for the first time. "What do you think?" she asked, eyes wide like I was still a man who believed in her. I told her it was polished. Really clean. She kissed me on the cheek and said, "Knew you'd love it." And I did. Because it was proof. Because now, everything was in motion. She thought the launch was a beginning. She didn't know it was the apex of her climb, and tomorrow, the descent would begin. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to accuse. I just needed time. Because when you steal from a builder, he doesn't burn down the house. He waits for the moment the roof creaks, and then he removes the one beam you never thought he noticed. She must have felt it, the shift in air, the way I'd stopped flinching when she touched me, the silence too sharp to be casual. People like Lena sense weakness the same way wolves smell blood, and when it dries, they panic. It started with softness. She brought me coffee 2 mornings in a row, oat milk steamed just right, cinnamon on top, the ritual she'd abandoned months ago without a word. "Thought you could use it," she said, brushing her fingers against mine like we were still stitched together. I said thanks. That's all. No smile. No kiss. Just thanks. That's when she pivoted. Tears, quiet and practiced. One evening when I forgot to ask how her planning meeting went. She sat on the edge of the bed, hoodie too big, sleeves pulled over her hands like a teenager apologizing for skipping class. I feel like you're slipping away from me," she whispered. "Like you're here, but already gone." I turned to her slowly and said, "That's a strange thing to say." Her lip trembled, and I could almost see the mental shuffle, which tactic next. She sniffled and leaned into me, head on my shoulder, like muscle memory would summon forgiveness. "I know I haven't been easy lately. I've been overwhelmed. The pressure's intense. And maybe I leaned on the wrong people for support, but that's not," she paused, gauging my reaction, realizing I gave her none. "It's not what you think." That was the moment the crack appeared, not in me, in her. Because she needed my emotion to survive. She needed anger, accusations, something to press against. But I gave her nothing. Just quiet. "Look, Colby, she exhaled, laughed lightly like she was brushing off a silly misunderstanding. "He's a client. A boy with good lighting. He needed guidance, and I gave him that. Maybe too much. But it wasn't personal. Not like this. Not like us." I could feel her watching me from the corner of her eye, trying to measure the depth of the damage, trying to decide how much remorse to fake. "I would never intentionally hurt you. You know that, right?" I nodded. One slow nod. She kept talking, a monologue of deflection, half apologies, passive justifications. How hard it was to be in the art world. How no one respects women curators. How she just wanted to elevate something. I listened. Patiently. Like a craftsman waiting for glue to dry before cutting the final edge. "We can fix this," she said eventually, her hand on my chest, voice honeyed with desperation. "We're a team. We've always been a team." I turned to her. I steady. "Is that what we are?" I asked, and she smiled like the door had reopened. But I wasn't asking because I didn't know. I was asking so she'd keep lying. She nodded quickly. "Yes. God, yes. We just lost our way for a second." I did. "But I'm back now." She kissed me then, tentative at first, then deeper, as if she could press her betrayal into submission. I let her. Not because I believed her, not because I wanted her, but because I wanted to see what she'd do when she thought the storm had passed. She wrapped herself around me that night like someone clinging to a tree in a flood, thinking proximity equaled safety. I held her, still and distant, cataloging the manipulation the way a surgeon studies anatomy. Every touch was a tactic, every breath a test. She didn't sleep deeply. I could feel the twitch in her limbs, the unsettled rhythm of someone lying beside a man she knew had started thinking in silence. She thought she had time. She thought guilt had worked. But the thing about guilt is, it only sticks when the other person needs to forgive you. And I didn't. Not anymore. I wasn't angry. I was prepared. And she mistook that for mercy. I began with the contracts, quiet, precise, buried beneath the paperwork she never bothered to read. Months ago, I'd incorporated my workshop into a formal LLC, something Lena encouraged at the time because it made us look more professional to galleries and backers. What she didn't realize, what she never cared to ask, was that I'd made her a silent partner, a title that gave her zero ownership but enough official association to pull her name into any misuse of company assets. And when she started pushing collaborative pieces with Colby, she began using my materials, my tools, even booking deliveries under the LLC's FedEx account. I cataloged everyone. The invoices stacked neatly into a narrative that no curator could ignore if placed in the right hands. She thought her power lived in the aesthetic, in social currency and gallery invites, but the real weight was in the paper trail. So I started preparing a portfolio, not of furniture, but of fraud. I compiled emails, voice memos I recorded during our planning sessions, screenshots of her discussing my work as hers, invoices linking her name to stolen inventory. I cross-referenced product SKUs, shipping logs, metadata, everything. My shop wasn't just a place of craft anymore. It was a crime scene I had perfectly preserved, and I was both the victim and the detective. The second prong was Colby, the weak link. He was too new, too fast, too naive. I created a fake buyer profile using an old client's abandoned brand name and reached out to him directly, feigning interest in the Echo collection for a high-end boutique chain. He responded within hours, cocky and overeager, even offering early access to unreleased pieces. I baited him carefully, asking for design backstories. He sent over a deck filled with photos, my sketches with his logo overlaid. No credit. No trace of me. That was the nail. I packaged it all, a clean, brutal narrative. Theft, fraud, professional misrepresentation. I printed physical binders with glossy covers, each labeled Attribution Abuse and Ethical Violations, Echo Collection 2025. Then came the placements. I didn't go public. I didn't torture online. I went deeper. I sent the binders directly, by courier, to every gallery Lena had ever pitched, every curator she'd mentioned by name, every design publication she said was watching us closely. I signed nothing. I used a generic legal consultancy address as the sender. No emotion. No rage. Just fact. I also sent one to her sponsor foundation, the one that provided her with grant money to amplify emerging voices in design. Inside were the emails showing how she took my story, my father, the chapel, the grief, and recycled it for Colby's origin myth. All time-stamped. All sourced. The worst part for her wasn't that I accused her. It was that I didn't have to. I simply held up a mirror. When she talked about vision, I gave her the unfiltered view. A week later, I canceled our joint website domain and redirected it to a static page that read, under ethical review, please contact new business email for legitimate design inquiries. By then, I'd already launched a rebrand under my father's middle name, entirely separate from her. I pulled all my original work, scrubbed every connection. She tried to log into our design account. I'd changed the passwords weeks ago. When she asked about the site being down, I told her we'd been hacked. She nodded, tried to look concerned. I knew she'd figure it out soon. I counted on it. Because when people like Lena fall, they don't plummet, they unravel, strand by strand, in whispers and rumors and inboxes full of sudden silence. The kind of silence that smells like burned bridges. I wasn't just taking back my work. I was cutting out her future one curator at a time. Not loudly, not publicly, but permanently. This wasn't revenge out of anger. It was reclamation, cold, deliberate, merciless in its simplicity. She made the mistake of thinking a craftsman is slow. But what she never understood is that we don't move slow. We move exact. It started with a phone call she took in the kitchen, bright morning, eggs on the stove, steam curling against the window, and suddenly her voice dropped, brittle and sharp. What do you mean on hold? No, the press release went out already, then silence. The kind that drags across a room like a knife edge. I watched from the other side of the counter, calmly slicing bread, as she paced barefoot across the tile. Gallery number 1. Gone. I knew it would be. They were one of the first I sent the binder to. Their founder was an old-school purist, the kind who believes theft is worse than failure. Lena didn't sleep that night. She was on her laptop until 3 a.m., sending emails, making calls, spinning new versions of the story to every contact she could find. But damage done with precision is hard to unwrite. She kept saying things like misunderstanding and miscommunication out loud, as if practicing the script for an audience that was already walking out. By the end of the week, 3 more sponsors had ghosted her. The invitation to speak on that panel in LA? Rescinded. No reason given. But I knew. Her name was no longer a pitch. It was a risk. I never raised my voice, never confronted. I just watched the entropy unfold. One evening she came home late, visibly rattled, makeup smudged in a way that wasn't from nightlife. It was from trying not to cry in a public restroom. Everyone's acting weird, she muttered. Like I'm radioactive. I nodded, offered her a glass of water, and asked if she wanted to talk. She did. She launched into a frantic unraveling. Someone must be sabotaging her. Maybe an ex-client. Maybe a jealous peer. They're accusing me of stealing your designs, she said finally, trying to play innocent, hoping I'd take the bait. I raised my eyebrows slightly, as if surprised, but said nothing. That hesitation? It gutted her. She saw in that moment the flicker of doubt she hadn't counted on. The next week, the full Echo collection was pulled from 2 high-end retailers pending authenticity verification. The buzz she had generated now turned toxic, back-channel whispers, murmurs at events, awkward pauses on Zoom calls. Her voice got higher when she spoke to me now, more performative, like she was selling sincerity she didn't own anymore. I kept our routines intact, kissed her cheek in the morning, made coffee just how she liked it. But there was a vacancy behind my eyes that unsettled her. She started looking at me like she was trying to locate the weapon in the room. That's the thing about silence. It's not absence. It's pressure. One night, I watched her delete photos off her Instagram, one by one, the gallery openings, the smiling shots with Colby, anything that looked like a celebration of Echo. The illusion was breaking, pixel by pixel. When her name got quietly dropped from the jury of a major design award, she lost it. Threw a glass across the room. "It's not fair," she shouted. "This is my work too." I turned to her then, slow and steady, and said, "No, it's mine. You just dressed it up in your name." She stared at me like I'd slapped her, not because I was wrong, but because she finally realized I'd always known. And worse, I wasn't done yet. You always thought the silence meant I didn't see you, that my quiet was ignorance, or maybe weakness, something you could exploit while you smiled over your shoulder and stole from my hands. But silence isn't surrender, Lena. It's surveillance. It's calculation. And you gave me everything I needed by assuming I was too slow, too loyal, too in love to notice the rot behind the wallpaper. But I noticed. I noticed when you stopped asking about my work, when you turned my grief into a dinner anecdote for gallery friends who couldn't tell ash from pine. I noticed when you called my pieces conceptually raw instead of calling them mine. I even noticed when you used my stories, my father, the chapel, the designs born from things you'll never understand, and handed them to a boy who thinks legacy is measured in likes. And now you want sympathy? Now you want forgiveness? After you bled me into your press kits and stitched yourself a future out of my past? You weren't building a brand. You were building a mausoleum, and you buried me in it before I ever got the credit. So let's be clear, because I want you to hear this without interruption. Every gallery you've lost, every contract pulled, every whisper that turns to silence when you enter a room, that was me. I didn't shout. I didn't shame. I didn't need to. I just told the truth in order, with dates, with receipts. And the truth is, you never created anything. You curated theft. You dressed it in lighting and buzzwords and passed it off as your vision. But now your name is poison. Not because I ruined you, Lena, because I unmasked you. And I want you to sit with that. I want you to remember that the man you called slow, the man you pitted for his quiet routines and humble tools, is the one who dismantled you without ever raising his voice. That's what craft is. That's what real creation looks like. It doesn't scream. It doesn't plead. It endures, and it outlasts liars like you. So go ahead, rebuild. Rebrand. Try again. But understand this. Every room you walk into from now on will have a shadow in it, mine. And every time someone hesitates before shaking your hand, every time an email goes unanswered, every time you wonder why your ideas suddenly feel stale and your contacts go cold, know that's the echo of what you tried to take from me. You wanted legacy, Lena. Congratulations. This is yours. She still lives in the city, I hear. Smaller place now. Less glass, fewer invitations. No gallery openings, no feature spreads, no curated dinners lit by pendant bulbs and empty praise. Just a one-bedroom above a vegan cafe where no one knows her name unless she tells them. Colby vanished not long after the fallout, sunk back into sponsored nonsense, never publicly addressed the designs he passed off as his own. Of course he didn't. He was never built for weight. Lena was. Or at least she thought she was. But legacy isn't about ambition. It's about staying power. And now she knows the difference. I never raised my voice. Never posted a single word online. But the silence followed her like a stain. She made a name for herself using mine, and when I took it back, there was nothing left in her hands but Echo. The Echo collection never recovered. Neither did she. She sent me an email once short, 2 lines. I understand now. I'm sorry. I didn't respond. Not out of cruelty, but because there was nothing left to say. She wanted forgiveness to feel like a reset. But what she took wasn't just art, it was trust. And trust doesn't regrow. It withers, quietly, like roots starved of water, until the whole structure falls without sound. My workshop is quieter now. Not peaceful, precise. I don't build like I used to. There's no poetry in the grain anymore. Just utility. I craft with purpose, not feeling. And in a way, that's its own kind of freedom. Paint sculpts you. Carves out all the illusions until only the frame remains, unpainted, unsentimental, solid. I don't believe in partnership anymore. I believe in blueprints, measurements, signed contracts. But I sleep well. I eat alone. I drink the same coffee every morning and smile at no one. And that's enough. Because I know who I am. And she knows who she isn't. Legacy isn't what people say when you're gone. It's what they stop saying when you leave. And her name? It doesn't open doors anymore. It shuts them. Quietly. Completely. That's what remains. Me, intact, unshaken, untouchable. Her, remembered only by the silence that follows her into every room. That's the ending. No redemption. No return. Just the sound of everything she built collapsing in a voice that no one listens to anymore.